The views and opinions of this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading.
Make sure to subscribe to the Market Talk YouTube channel. You can watch our latest interviews with top market analysts in the country, find bonus content, and much more. It's easy. Just go to youtube.com/@MarketTalkAg and hit the subscribe button. Or you can search for Market Talk Ag on YouTube.
Well, joining us now on the program, we want to learn more about a new company called Steward and how they are looking at some of the various ways that farmers can focus on regenerative agriculture and focus on different ways that they can find funding for their operations, et cetera, et cetera. Really excited about this conversation. Joining us here today on the program, he is the founder of Steward. Dan Miller is with us here on the show. Dan, thanks for being with us on the program and hope you're doing well.
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Jesse.
Give us a little background on Steward first off here, Dan, and maybe set this up for folks. Why did you start the company and what do you guys do?
Sure. So Steward provides capital to regenerative farmers and for regional food systems infrastructure. So we provide credit loans to producers for land, infrastructure, equipment, value-added processing, really anything to get the product to market. The genesis of the business was around regional supply chains that I began tracing. Actually, a chef that I got to know who was buying from over 150 farmers directly, amazing heritage products, telling a great story, showcasing the food at his restaurant. And then as I spoke to those farmers, none of them could get access to capital. And you saw this big gap between demand and supply, and the people who are supplying traceable regional heritage products that consumers wanted couldn't get financing. And then I went down the path of, well, why couldn't get financing? And you quickly learn that ag policy actually drives financing decisions, not market demand. And so you get in a world where there's a lot of commodity financing for conventional commodity ag, there's unlimited amounts of it. But the second you're outside of that, regional food systems, non-traditional crops, value-added products, there's very little financing available. So Steward was created to provide the capital for those regionally focused kind of watershed driven projects. And then we also focus on regenerative agriculture in terms of farming practices. So focusing on soil health, focusing on integrated crop rotations and cover crop and grazing. And we can go into that, but the goal is really identity preserve, traceable, nutritious products grown within the region, sold to customers in a transparent way, and bringing more value to farmers in that supply chain.
Well, and you raised a great point there that I think will kind of frame up our discussion here to start is that we think about, traditional row crops, for instance, corn, soybeans, wheat, how commodity prices can typically drive a lot of funding for an operation or some of your traditional ag lenders, so to speak, things like that. But when you get outside that realm, we start talking specialty crops or, regional type of crops that a lot of those, a lot of funding challenges could be out there, and commodity prices can't necessarily be relied upon all the time as being a source of good income for your operation. So talk about that a little bit more, Dan.
A lot of the farmers we support, it's about getting more value out of the value chain. So even for crops such as wheat, we work with a company called Cairn Spring Mills. It's a stone mill in the Pacific Northwest, purchasing grain directly from farmers, milling it throughout the year and selling it to bakers and for food service. And so for them, they created this mill to bring more value to rotational grains. Farmers were losing money on rotational grains. It was not only good for soil health, but they wanted to bring some more income to that. So by stone milling a product and having it traceable and sold through direct supply chains, they're able to get a higher price and they're able to pay their farmers about 30% above the commodity price. So even what is considered a commodity product, by decommoditizing it, telling the story of the land and where it's from, tracing it through a system, they're able to get more value of it. So we focus on niche varieties of crops that don't have that type of broad market support, or crops like wheat or oats, where we're trying to get the producers farther down that value chain, farther down the value-added processing, and keeping more of that end margin.
Well, and I think about this too, supporting the economic health of our rural communities and some of these different, regional areas. I think that's at the heart of what we really need to look at as well, and make sure that certain farmers don't get overlooked when they need funding or have funding challenges, right, Dan?
And that's the challenge for a lot of agricultural producers. There's not much relationship-driven capital that's flexible. You've got the commodity-driven product from the traditional banking and government institutions, but if you need something that's custom designed for your operation, the unique aspects of it, it's not out there. So what we're hoping to do is be really focused on designing the financing around the needs of that farm. And then what's really unique about our model is we raise the capital directly online from our network of lenders. We have over 3,500 people who finance the loans through our platform. So by having a group of values-driven funders that are direct into the deal, it's also fair on terms and structure and really for the benefit of that producer. So I think it's about flipping that mentality of how can we support these producers and provide the capital they need versus forcing them into a certain system and saying the only way you can get money is to do it this way.
Well, and Dan too, I want to make sure it's not just something where you help with grains or other crops. You guys do help livestock producers too. I know you have an example of a co-op in Montana that you guys have helped out as well. Could you talk about that aspect as well?
Absolutely. So all types of crops, all types of livestock, even aquaculture as well. One of the projects that's my favorite is the one you mentioned. It's called Old Salt Co-op. It was created by 3 fifth-generation ranching families out of Montana, who each had their own specialty direct sales program that was only about 10% of their volume, and the other 90% was just getting sold at auction for generic prices. And so this beautiful product, heritage raised on grass in Montana, but because they were selling through the conventional supply chain, they were not getting any of the value. So these 3 families, they've combined their direct programs, and they've created a new company called Old Salt Co-op that is building slaughter, value-added processing, direct-to-consumer sales, and a restaurant butcher shop in downtown Helena that's actually opening next week. So producer-owned, fully controlled through the value chain from the land, through slaughter and processing to value-added products, built for that regional market. And these 3 founding ranches are on about 200,000 acres across them. So these are really large operations. Even they were getting squeezed by the packers and getting low prices. So it doesn't matter what producer you are, you're still at the mercy of the big conglomerates. And that's really our goal. How can we build these regional supply chains for the benefit of that watershed and those producers where the value is actually staying with those producers?
We are talking today with Dan Miller, the founder of Steward. You can learn more about them online. Go steward.com. Dan, give us some thoughts on the regenerative ag sustainability aspect of what you guys do at Steward as well. I'd love to highlight that because, of course, that's been a hot topic throughout agriculture here for the last few years.
Too hot of a topic, maybe. So I started Steward in 2016. I used the term sustainable agriculture at that time. I was from Washington, D.C. The Chesapeake Bay watershed was always close to my heart. So it was about who are the producers farming in alignment with that ecosystem, not having right nitrogen runoff in the bay, focused on healthy food for in the regional community. And so I was trying to find those producers driven by ecology, driven by farming practices first. And then I found that those types of producers are everywhere, really with a deep land ethic that want to farm in a way that's alignment with the nature, that want to have healthy, nutritious food, that want to plug into these regional supply chains. They just don't have the resources to do it. And so our business generally is focused on existing regenerative farmers who are growing. And when I talk about regenerative, we're talking about focusing on soil health, focusing on water conservation, cover crops, minimal to no tillage, also talking about wages that they're paying to their workers, distance of supply chain. We want a fully healthy kind of regional system built around that ecosystem. So you not only have soil health and product health, but you also have value staying within those communities. But those practices look different places, and it depends on the specific farm and their enterprise. And so in our loan agreement, we have a 4-page definition of our regenerative agricultural principles, the general theme behind those principles, and what needs to be followed by the farmer. And then if they have conventional practices that require conversion, that'll be written in the transition plan. So we do also work with a farm, for example, in the Southwest on 8,000 acres that's now growing regenerative organic cotton and other rotational crops. And so we've provided financing actually for their input purchases of biological inputs from a input seller, which aren't the conventional inputs that the bank wouldn't finance. And so really anywhere we can help a producer grow and not only improve their practices, but get market access and viability. So we see it as one component: healthy land, healthy producers, healthy people, and an economic model that is actually intending to sustain the land. And that's the benefit of our direct funding model, is everyone on our platform is driven by the goal of supporting these producers who are really grounded in their communities and in their land. And that's the goal that we're all striving for.
Well, Dan, great thoughts, and really appreciate some background on Steward and the lending platform that you guys have, giving another option to producers out there. Final thoughts from you? Anything you would want to share or reiterate to folks who are maybe listening in and interested in working with you guys and talking to you? Anything final you would want to add, Dan?
Yeah, I would say one thing that we've been focusing on in business a lot recently is value-added regional processing. So I mentioned a flour mill in the Pacific Northwest. We're actually working with that company, Cairn Spring Mills, to build a $40 million flour mill in Northeast Oregon. So really regional scale infrastructure. Similarly, we just provided funding to a rice mill in Missouri, and we're underwriting a loan to an oat mill in Minnesota. All of these are producer-driven, producer-owned infrastructure projects. And so any group of producers out there that is trying to take the next step around infrastructure, that's trying to aggregate for shared processing and brand development, we really love supporting those networks. I would say for any groups that are out there looking to drive more growth and more kind of value add to the region, wanting more control of the supply chain out of the hands of the multinationals, that's really producer focused and regionally focused, that's where we thrive. So I really welcome those deals. And I love seeing an successful example of reinvestment in a community that is net positive. And that's what I enjoy so much about this business. We're lending money, people are earning a return. We're lending around prime, let's say. Prime's 8.5 now, roughly. So people earn a return, but they're doing it because they care and they see the benefit. And it's rare, I would say, to have an economic transaction that has ecological and social benefits with it. And that's what I most enjoy about this work, the blend of all of those components together.
Well, again, learn more, go steward.com. And with that, the founder of Steward, Dan Miller. Dan, thanks for joining us here on the program today. Really appreciate it. We'll have to have a conversation again in the future. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jesse.